Hey there, how are you doing? Normally on a Monday, I would do something live and it would go live mostly through my Facebook page, and then it would be shared to other places. But today I've decided I needed to do it a slightly different way because I need to reach more platforms with what I'm about to talk about today. Why do I need to reach more platforms? Because I receive lots of questions from different places. And some of those places include LinkedIn, for example, and YouTube, Threads, which is interesting because I don't use Threads a massive amount, but I do use it a little bit, mostly to respond to other things, not my own stuff. But, so questions come in from different sources. And one of the very common questions I receive is, hi, Steve, we like your posts, or I like your posts. I think they're really cool. Who are you? Where do you come from? What do you do? Are you qualified? So they're all questions relating to who I am and how did I get to where I am today. So what I thought I'd do is make a special video today to answer some of those questions, because one of the things that's really important to me is this whole thing of transparency, because I think it's important that people I work with know what my personal journey is. They know why I became a therapist, a counselor, a coach. They know how I became those things. It's good to share my challenges. I'm a human being too. I too have challenges. So to share some of my challenges and how I overcame them and how those experiences help to shape who I am. And there's lots of milestones, like in your story, there's lots of milestones, there's lots of pivotal moments that come from my life or my career. And some of them are worth sharing because they can help and enable people to overcome their own challenges. So it's good to share. Sometimes it's great to talk, right? So let's do a little bit of talking and have a think. How did it start? Where did I come from? So years ago, when I was quite young, around about 16, bit less than 16 years old, before I left school. It was intended by my family that I would work as hard as I could at school, get some qualifications, as in O-level, as they were at a particular time in the UK, and then get a good job with an apprenticeship. So there would be training from 3 to 4 years. Yeah, 4 years plus in some places. So there would be training. And at the end of that, I would have a qualification. So I would be an engineer or something like that, working for a respectable company where the pay was good. And I would be able to save, and eventually fall in love, eventually get married, eventually buy a house, family, children, cycle repeats. But that wasn't me. That didn't work. It didn't fit. It didn't work for me at all. Although I did follow it in the early days because I felt that as a 16-year-old by the time I left school, that's what I needed to do. But I discovered that my passion was not at all in working for a big company with the idea of save, get married, buy a house, all of that stuff. It just wasn't right for me, not at that time in my life at least. So I needed to do something about that. There was no passion, so I couldn't get excited. So what could I do? So I packed my bags. I left my amazingly paid job. My mum couldn't believe it. And I went traveling for 2 years without a break. Really great. I traveled all over the place. I went to the Middle East. I went some places at that time weren't officially allowed for Western tourists. I went to some amazing places thanks to some local people I got to know in various places. So I traveled to the Middle East. I traveled all over Europe, Southern Europe, Northern Europe, Central Europe. I worked in all kinds of jobs. I worked in a ski resort. I worked in a hotel. I worked for a farm, milking cows. I did a ton of different things, none of which related to what I really wanted to do. But that was okay because I was having a brilliant time. I was learning a load of stuff about different cultures and different people and so on and so forth. It was brilliant. But at the end of 2 years, I went back to the UK. And what did I do in the UK? I spent a year as a volunteer. I was a training officer for a very large play scheme in the northwest of England. So the play scheme looked after for a period of about 2 weeks. 2 weeks it was, I think, maybe a month. Can't remember. It doesn't matter. So the play scheme looked after quite young children up to about the age of 11 or 12. But what was necessary in addition to looking after those kids, of course, was that people were needed who knew how to work with these children, how to look after these children in groups, how to make sure that safety was taken care of, how the program was taken care of, and a lot of other stuff. So as training officer, my role was to train 16-year-old, 16-plus-year-olds in looking after small groups of children, which was fantastic, great experience, which began to take me down the road I wanted to follow. I'd already been a volunteer in various youth centres in the district before going travelling. So I was heading towards working with community groups, with youth groups, and I was particularly interested in counselling at the time. So I went to university after spending that year as a training officer. And at the university, I trained as a youth and community studies. So the focus was on young people, but my main interest was somewhere between young people and their community. And community, of course, involved family, the wider community, so it's a whole load of stuff. And as I said, counselling. So that is where my early days career started. And after qualifying, getting my first degree, I went to live and work in London, which was quite scary for a guy coming from the northwest of England, even though I'd travelled all over the place. So I went to work in London for almost 3 years in a youth and community setting on a very large housing estate near Croydon. Great experience. Whoa, that was an eye-opener, some of that. And then eventually I went to work in Germany with the British Forces Germany, or what became the Army Welfare Service, Community and Youth Service. So I went to work in Germany, and that also was an amazing experience because you have a situation there where communities are very fluid. So people come to a location with their family and they would stay for 2 to 3 years on average, and then they would move on again. So that brought with it a whole load of challenges. So my role in there was counselling and so on, looking after families, looking after young people, developing programs, educational programs, social and political education, not political, or political. Ask me about that another day. So there was a whole load of stuff involved in all of that. And I was very passionate, absolutely passionate about what I was doing. I was so passionate that I worked longer hours than I should have worked. I didn't take enough days off sometimes, and I really did keep going. And I didn't realize that I was getting tired. I didn't realize that actually perhaps I needed to take a break. And then somebody said to me, Mr. Costello, you are no longer fit for purpose. The person who said that was a medical officer, a military medical officer. I'd had an accident, but I'll tell you the story. But when I heard that phrase, you are no longer fit for purpose, I was devastated. So let's go back to a point a few years before this. I thought I was broken this particular day. It was a terrible day at the office. Stress. And the stress was, of course, absolutely work-related. Or was it? Now, I know plenty about stress. I knew a lot about stress at that time. PTSD, psychological therapist. Why? Because it was my job. But yet, why wasn't I applying my knowledge to myself? Well, the simple answer to that is just because I'm trained doesn't mean I don't sometimes need help too. That would have been a really wise thought at that time. But the problem was that my head was full of what if, what then? I'd lost connection with what now, that magical moment where everything happens. And my thinking kind of drifted between somewhere back then in the past and this imagined utopia somewhere off in the future. Let's think about a couple of current statistics. Around 74% of UK adults have felt so stressed at some point in the last year or so that they felt overwhelmed or unable to cope. 32% of adults said they had experienced suicidal feelings as a result of stress. 32%. 16% said they'd self-harmed. Whoa. I often use statistics to inform where I target my attention as a professional. But such statistics really weren't much use when I felt broken. And we all know there's loads of talk about work-related stress. But the truth was that my stress originated in a failing personal relationship. Although that's easy to say today, it took many, many months to work that one out and move on. So at the end of that difficult day I mentioned a few minutes ago, I went home, I changed and pointed my mountain bike at the forest. 5 kilometers later, I broke my bike. And then I had a tantrum. I really did. I went for it. The world was a mean and nasty place, and it was everybody's fault except my own. Even the manufacturer of the smashed gear component. And that was supposed to be a stress-relieving bike ride. So what did I learn from that experience? Nothing. My head stayed firmly buried in the sand, and I acted like I was okay. And that worked because nobody interrupted my Oscar-worthy performance. Nobody thought to ask, are you okay? Because on the outside, I did seem okay. A few months later, I crashed while out training. It wasn't a big deal, well, it hurt. It was just the top of the tibia fracture. And that was followed by several weeks off work to enable me to recover. Well, I had a hip to toe plaster, so I couldn't really get to work. A year later, I was addicted to opiates, also known as pain relief medication. But yet, the pain still ran rife through my entire body. More opiates, no pain relief. And then came a letter from a senior doctor. You have an appointment. Bring a partner, a friend, blah, 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 blah. Well, that wasn't worrying. I better polish my wheelchair because me or one of our 3 under 7s has probably dropped food on it. I'm not joking. So there we are, sitting in the doctor's office. It was a beautiful spring day. Sunlight was flooding through the window. It was just a small window, quite high up. And the doctor said, I'm sorry to tell you, Steve, that you shouldn't expect to leave your wheelchair again, ever. And then we were outside the hospital building in silence. The opiate addict was now fully confined to a wheelchair. And when that medical report landed on my employer's desk, I was called to another examination, this time with the occupational health doctor I mentioned earlier. He pushed me hard and more than once tried to get me to admit that I was no longer able to do my job. I pushed back. I'd lost enough self-respect. I didn't want to give up anymore. And especially to this person who didn't once, not once, look me in the eye. Images of my partner and our young children ran on repeat through my mind. Until the doctor's voice dragged me back to reality. You are no longer fit for purpose. And that meeting ended really abruptly, moments later, with those words, kind of digging deep into every aspect of my being. And the fog around me, there was a kind of fog around me. It became so impenetrable that I lost my sense of self. The pain increased to a point where, when a medical professional asked me for my pain score, which was usually a number between 1 and 10, mine was usually 15 or more. Hey, Steve, what's your pain score? 15. And they would look at me like, oh. They worked hard to treat the pain with a cascade of interventions: minor surgery, medical processes, medications, physiotherapy, MRI, CT, X-ray. It was all about the body. Until a physical therapist came along and taught me how to breathe through the pain. That was a very cool intervention. And it was also my first mindfulness intervention. And it had a remarkable effect after a few weeks of frequent practice. Strange things started to happen too. So while I was breathing through the pain, I noticed images and sensations from my past. In particular, when I felt depressive symptoms, I felt a little bit depressed. Weirdly, I always had heightened knee pain, which isn't weird at all because these factors are associated with knee pain and physical function. So the depression, the knee pain, the physical function are related. None of the medics linked these things together at that time, although they did respond to my depressive symptoms, and they did that by offering sessions with a psychologist and more medication. I liked the psychologist, though. She was cool. Although I often noticed a slight frown when she saw me in the waiting room. True, I was not exactly a model patient at the start of our relationship. So you may have heard that joke, the joke about doctors not making the best patients. Well, psychologists don't make the best patients for the psychologists either. But I did get on board with the psychotherapy program. And as challenging as it was, opening up all those firmly locked doors, we did take faltering steps forward. She asked me what I wanted. I said to get back to the way things were. I wanted my career back and all that stuff. She didn't need to tell me that there was no going back. Not really. She did tell me, but she didn't really need to. I knew that. Still, those sessions did enable me to move forward. The pity was that they stopped after 8 sessions and I was offered this group program. So while all of this is going on, don't forget there's a family. And by this part of the story, we'd moved our home from the Netherlands back to the UK. There were 3 children when I crashed out. Now there's 6. There was massive, massive motivation to do something about the morphine addicted partner and dad. Not to mention my own self-esteem. So what was this group program all about? Well, I wasn't a stranger to delivering group programs to young people in various community groups. I had some understandings. But to be offered a place in a therapy group, to be honest, scared me. It did. It scared me. I would be asked to share my vulnerabilities in front of people I didn't know. Good grief. People would judge. I had enough on my plate with my own problems. Why on earth would I want to get involved with other people's problems? That all sounds really selfish, right? So let's just pop back a little bit to a time before the accident. My partner used to joke that my head was so big that one day I wouldn't be able to get through doorways. I never lacked confidence. The guy who joined that pain management group was a complete opposite. And he would rather have watched the process through a video feed with no camera on me than get involved. And there was another problem too. The team who was to work with the group were multidisciplinary. Now, you'd think that's a good thing. But the problem with this particular group, at least for me, was that one of them was a nurse practitioner who specialized in pain medications. And I'd heard that she didn't support the use of opiates for pain management. So what happened? The addicted me had a meltdown. We're talking big time meltdown here. And that was because there was a possibility that my pain meds might be interfered with or even removed. So let's think about addiction for a minute. The UK has the highest consumption rate of prescription opioids for pain management per capita in the world, despite declining rates globally. I was one of those statistics. Looking back at my past self, I see some things that give me the shivers. I was completely addicted and displaying behavior associated with addicts. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. The thought of stopping the medications was unthinkable. I had no control concerning the substance. I regularly took more than had been prescribed, and I became really sneaky at getting more, so I would never run out. I never stole any or anything like that. I was just really clever at saying I'd run out and I hadn't. There was often an overwhelming desire for more of this medication. And my addictive behavior was absolutely not causing negative consequences. It was not. I kept telling myself that. I needed more because it wasn't reducing the pain. So can this happen to anyone, or is it a sign of a weak character or some kind of moral failing? Well, science has confirmed that addiction is a chronic brain disease and it can happen to anyone. Yet despite this, there is still widespread belief that addiction is the result of weak character or moral failing. Addiction experts argue that the behaviors of an addict aren't because they lack morality, aren't because they lack a strong character, but instead they emphasize that the behavior of an addict is about a disease that is a mental illness. Doesn't give me an excuse, but I wasn't concerned with character or morality. I simply needed the medication to place a soothing blanket over the physical and mental pain. The thing was, it really didn't take any of the pain away. And I didn't appreciate that I had a problem or the extent of the problem and the effects of the problem on me, my family, my children. So I continued to use this medication and it increased despite the consequences. Now, it's said that without intervention and appropriate treatment, it's unlikely that addict behavior will end. Well, thankfully, I got over myself and the group started that process of intervention. And I discovered that my concerns really were unfounded. There was no judgment, just a lot of understanding. We shared our vulnerabilities and empathized with one another. As a member of that group, the Steve whose head was at risk of not getting through doorways started to come back. It was just glimpses at first, no big deal. Hey, I'm here. The addictive behavior didn't end at that group, although the process did get underway. Now, it's going to seem like I'm pointing fingers, but I'm not. I became a pain medication addict because the pain I had was overwhelming. I was prescribed opiates. The group turned some of the lights back on, enough for me to say to a GP that I needed help. The GP's response wasn't particularly helpful. He said, try reducing slowly. Come back and see me in a couple of months. Not much help, not really. So the next 6 months were previously unimaginable in my experience. Think of the worst thing you can that makes you want to scream. I'm talking about the screech of fingernails on metal or a chalkboard. Anything that threatens your sanity. Think about it. Now imagine multiplying that feeling tenfold. Mine was kind of a metal train traveling through my body. Now let's breathe and shake that feeling out because it's not pleasant. It took 2 years to reclaim my body and sense of self. I did it through mindfulness, personal development, coaching, talk therapy, group therapy, and most of all, very, very important, resurrecting my own skills, my personal development skills, my coaching skills, my counseling skills, my therapy skills, to help other people in all of these areas. I took my experiences of pain and addiction and packaged them into programs to help other people with or without pain. I've been a life passenger for a long time because of what happened. It was long enough. But one thing that was or did become tattooed on my psyche was never again. My purpose, my passion for helping other people was derailed partly because I was sucked into the busy culture and didn't give myself enough time. But it was also derailed by attitudes from other people. It was derailed by pain. It was derailed by addiction. But the thing was, I decided that I could not go back to the way things were before I spectacularly crashed out. And for sure, I would never go back to believing that I was no longer fit for purpose. I have a family, a wonderful business. I ride my mountain bike daily and I ski in the winter. I'm absolutely fit for purpose. Now, if anything I've talked about today resonates with you, if you recognize you in any of that, send me a message. I work 100% on confidentiality. Anybody who's worked with me knows that. So there's no fear that I will be sharing it with anybody else. If you need to talk, if you recognize yourself in any of that, or indeed if your story is different to mine, but you recognize some of the things, great, come back, talk to me. Always ask questions, always send messages, don't hesitate. You'll always get a positive response. Have a brilliant day. Take care. I'll speak to you again really soon. Bye for now.